Now we're going to explore some of the options in terms of horizontal spacing. So grab the type tool, insert your cursor here in this paragraph, and actually let's select the entire paragraph because there are two options that we skipped over. So if you were paying close attention, you notice that we skipped kerning and tracking. Now both of these features, kerning and tracking, control the space between words and letters. So what's the difference? Well, tracking affects an overall selection. So in this case, the entire paragraph or maybe the entire story, we might want to tweak that a little bit. So negative values make the spaces between the words and the characters a little bit tighter. For example, I'll set this to -10, and you'll see all those letters and words kind of scrunch in together a little bit. For a more extreme and obvious example, I don't really recommend doing this, but just to show off the idea, we can see that at -50%. Now if we want to loosen things a little bit, we might set that to a plus value of 10, +10, or a positive value of 50, and you can see things get really, really loose. You can choose from this pull down menu here. You can use your arrows to scroll that up and down, and you can type in a specific value if you want to. Now a common use for tracking would be a headline above a newspaper or a magazine story. With large type, you might just want to compress and tighten that up a little bit. Now the question then is, if that's what tracking does, what's the difference between tracking and kerning? Well, kerning, as you can see here in the tooltip, is calculated in thousandths of an M space. That's very detailed. Kerning is used to calculate the values between two specific letters. So if you want to customize things a little bit, this will help a lot. Now, in this pull-down menu, you can see that we have a couple of different options. We have the number values, very similar to tracking, but we also have two other options at the top. Those are metrics and optical. Now, metrics essentially uses the math built into the font created by the font designer, and it uses that math to calculate the spacing of the letters. So let's take a look. We'll actually try to trick the math here a little bit, and I think you'll see what I mean. So right now, this text is 10 point, but let's change this to 30 point. And you see what happens? The highlight surrounding the W shows that that letter is selected, and it really shows off how bad the spacing is between the W and the O. If I click off of that, you realize that's pretty terrible. You could drive an SUV through there. So we want to tighten that up. So we'll insert our cursor between those two letters and start playing with the kerning. Now remember, we don't want to use positive values because that will make the distance even greater. Instead, we'll use a negative value, maybe -10 or -25, and well, that brought it in a little bit. It needs a little bit more help. So maybe I'll use the down arrow here to bring it in closer and closer and closer. I'm just inserted my cursor here up in this field, using the down arrow to tweak that. That's not so bad, but it is pretty tedious. So my suggestion is, instead of using the math built into the font, which uses the metric system, let's use optical. We'll choose that. Just give it a second, and you can see how InDesign intuitively understands the letter form, not the math of the letter, but actually the shape of the letter, and tucks that word underneath there. Now you can see that the left side of this actually intersects with the serif here on the W in a way that's pretty unnatural. However, from a reader perspective, it looks much better. So with that cursor inserted, we look here in the pull-down menu. We remember that it's set to optical, and the value in parentheses that InDesign is calculating for us in this specific instance is -113. If you want to tweak that from there a little bit more, maybe you want this -115 to just tweak that, you can do that. Normally, I find great results just using the optical kerning. It gets me, say, 95% of the way there without any extra work.